If your own parents hid $3 million from you for 25 years, would you forgive them? Because what I learned on my birthday shattered everything I thought I knew about family. Stay with me as I tell you what happened, and if this story reaches your heart, I'd appreciate your support. Hit subscribe, leave a like, and share it with someone who might need to hear it. My name is Nalia Booker, and turning 25 was supposed to be simple. I wasn't expecting a party or gifts. Honestly, I was just proud that I made it through another year without falling apart. Life had never been easy for me. I grew up in a home where money was always tight, where the electricity bill came with fear, and where my parents reminded me almost daily about how much they struggled to raise me. Because of that, I never asked them for anything. Not even when I worked 2 jobs in college and still barely had enough for books. Not even when I skipped meals to make sure rent was paid. I believed my parents had done their best, and I thought it was my turn to carry the weight. So on my birthday, I decided to visit the one person who always made me feel seen, my grandfather, Eldridge Talbot. He had always been different from my parents. Softer, quieter. He didn't talk much about the past, especially about my grandmother, who passed away when I was little. Still, I loved being around him. His house felt like safety in a world that never gave me a break. When I walked in, he hugged me like he hadn't seen me in years. Then his smile dropped just a little, like he was remembering something painful. He kept glancing at my parents, who hadn't come with me, and his jaw tightened each time. After a few minutes, he asked me to step outside with him. I followed him to the porch, expecting some kind of birthday advice, maybe a story about Grandma. But he looked at me with a seriousness I had never seen before. "Nalia," he said quietly, "your parents haven't been honest with you. There's something you should have known a long time ago." My stomach tightened. "About what?" He took a slow breath, like the words hurt him. "About your future. About what your grandmother left for you. There's something you were supposed to have." I didn't understand. I thought maybe he meant a photo album or an old necklace. Something sentimental. But the look in his eyes told me this was bigger. Much bigger. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small envelope, old, worn, like it had been opened and closed 1,000 times. He placed it gently in my hands, his voice almost shaking. "Nalia, this should have been yours when you turned 18. And it would have changed everything." I stared at him, confused, my heart pounding. I had no idea that opening that envelope would completely destroy the life I thought I understood. I held the old envelope in my hands, still not understanding why my grandfather looked so troubled. When I finally opened it, I found a stack of papers, some yellowed with age, others crisp and newly printed. My eyes moved over the words slowly, and for a moment, nothing made sense. Then my grandfather spoke, his voice steady but heavy, like he'd been waiting years to say this. "Nalia, your grandmother created a trust fund for you. $3 million. All of it meant for your future." I froze. I actually laughed a little because it sounded impossible. 3 million? Me? The girl who counted coins for gas? The woman who skipped doctor visits because copays were too high? It didn't feel real. But Eldridge didn't smile. He just watched me with tired eyes. "She made it before she got sick," he continued. "She wanted you to have choices. A home. Education. Freedom. She loved you more than anything." My heart started pounding louder. "But I never got anything. I never even heard about this." He nodded slowly, the pain in his face deepening. "Because your parents hid it from you. They were only supposed to hold it until you turned 18. That's all. They had no right to touch it." I felt a strange coldness spread through me. My hands shook as I looked at the documents again. There were signatures, my parents'. There were blocked access forms. Transfer requests. Legal terms I didn't understand but somehow knew weren't good. "Grandpa, what is this? Why would they?" His voice broke a little. "They stopped the bank from contacting you. They forged denial forms. They made sure every letter went to them. You were supposed to receive everything 7 years ago." My chest tightened until it hurt. I tried to breathe, but the air felt heavy and sharp, like each inhale cut deeper. A trust fund. $3 million. Money that could have kept the lights on. Money that could have kept me from working myself to exhaustion. Money that wasn't theirs. I felt stunned first, like my mind couldn't stretch wide enough to hold the truth. Then confusion hit me like a wave. Why? How? For what reason would parents keep something so life-changing from their own daughter? But beneath all that confusion, something darker started to grow. Anger. Hot, shaking, rising from a place I didn't know existed inside me. My parents had watched me struggle. They had listened to me cry over tuition. They had seen me skip meals, take double shifts, come home exhausted, and they said nothing. Not one word. Eldridge reached for my hand gently. I'm sorry, baby. I should have told you sooner. But I didn't have the documents until recently. When I found them, I knew you had to know the truth. The truth? I whispered. This is the truth? He shook his head sadly. Only part of it. What your parents did, it goes deeper than this. Much deeper. I stared down at the papers again, my vision blurring. $3 million. A future stolen before I even knew I had won. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of the truth. I was ready for it. I drove to my parents' house with the documents still trembling in my hands. Every mile felt heavier than the last. Part of me hoped there had been a mistake, that maybe Grandpa had misunderstood something. But deep down, I already knew the truth. I just needed to hear it from them. When I walked through the door, both of them were sitting in the living room. The place looked different, cleaner, newer, brighter than the home I grew up in. There was a new leather sofa, a large flat-screen TV, polished floors, and fresh paint on the walls. I had noticed the changes before, but I never questioned anything. I thought maybe they saved for years or used tax refunds. I was wrong. I dropped the papers onto the coffee table. Explain this, I said, my voice shaking. Marvette picked up the first page, skimmed it, and let out a small sigh. Not of guilt, but annoyance. Reginald didn't even reach for the papers. He just leaned back, arms crossed, watching me like I was bothering him. So it got out, Marvette said quietly. Got out. I snapped. This is about $3 million that was meant for me. For my life. Why didn't you ever tell me? She didn't flinch. Not even a little. Because we needed it, she said. We used it to build a better life. You wouldn't have known what to do with that kind of money. I stared at her, my mouth falling open. A better life? For who? Because it definitely wasn't for me. My father finally spoke. Don't start with that attitude. You were young. You would have wasted the money anyway. It was safer with us. Safer? I repeated. I worked 2 jobs. I cried over tuition. I struggled every single day while you had this. I pointed around the room. Suddenly, all the things I ignored became painfully clear. New appliances, expensive clothes, the vacation photos I had once brushed off as part of their anniversary deals. Even the car outside, the one they claimed they got through a lucky discount. Every life fell into place, piece by piece. I pulled out the bank statements Eldridge gave me. What about this hidden savings account? And these withdrawals? These trips? These purchases? Marvette didn't bother looking ashamed. We deserve to live comfortably after everything we sacrificed for you. Sacrificed. That word cut through me. Reginald shook his head like I was being ungrateful. Instead of yelling, you should be thanking us. We protected that money. We used it wisely. I felt something inside me break. Not anger, not shock, but something deeper. A quiet realization that hollowed me out from the inside. They didn't love me the way I thought. They didn't care if I struggled. They didn't worry when I cried or starved or begged life to get easier. To them, I wasn't a daughter. I was an opportunity. A bank account they could drain because they thought I didn't deserve what was already mine. My throat tightened, but I kept my voice steady. I can't do this. Not with you. Not anymore. I walked out before they could stop me, tears burning my eyes, but my steps steady. For the first time in my life, I realized I didn't lose my parents today. I just finally saw who they really were. I drove back to Grandpa Eldridge's house with my heart still aching from everything my parents had said. The anger, the coldness, the way they acted like stealing my future was no big deal. It all replayed in my mind over and over. By the time I reached his doorstep, my hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the need for answers. He opened the door before I could knock twice. One look at my face and he knew. They admitted it, didn't they? He asked softly. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. Tell me everything, I said. No holding back. I need the full truth. We sat at his small kitchen table, the same place where he used to give me cookies as a child. Now it felt like a courtroom. Eldridge took a slow breath, as if gathering pieces of a story he'd carried alone for years. Your parents have always had trouble with money, he began. Not just trouble, habits. Secrets. Choices they never wanted anyone to see. I listened as he explained how, long before the trust existed, Reginald and Marvette were known for manipulating relatives into lending them money they never paid back. They played the victim whenever it benefited them. They cut ties whenever someone questioned their behavior. When your grandmother created the trust, she told them it was for you, Eldridge said. She made it clear they weren't allowed to touch a single cent. So why did everyone disappear from my life? I asked. Why did no one ever reach out? His eyes softened with sadness. Because they shut us out. After they got the trust paperwork, they cut contact with the entire Talbot side of the family. They didn't want anyone reminding you, or them, what that money was meant for. A wave of confusion and hurt washed over me. My childhood suddenly felt like a puzzle with missing pieces. But they always told me you were unstable, I whispered. They said you were unpredictable and unsafe to be around. They said you had issues. Eldridge let out a bitter laugh. That's the story they needed you to believe. If you trusted me, you might have found out the truth. They couldn't risk that. I felt my stomach twist. All those years I stayed away from him, thinking I was protecting myself. And it had all been a lie. A lie told by the very people who were supposed to love me. Tears stung my eyes, but I wiped them away. I wasn't going to break. Not now. So what do? I asked quietly. You take back what's yours, he said firmly. You start by getting a lawyer. Someone who knows how to deal with people like them. I nodded, feeling a new sense of strength rise inside me. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about reclaiming my life, my choices, my truth. Eldridge reached across the table and placed his hand over mine. I always hoped one day you'd come looking for answers, he said. I just wish you didn't have to find them like this. I squeezed his hand, grateful despite the pain. I'm done letting them control my life, I said. It's time I finally fight back. Hiring a lawyer felt like stepping into a world I never imagined for myself, but I knew I couldn't fight my parents alone. Grandpa Eldridge recommended someone he trusted, Carmela Vance, an attorney known for taking on ugly, complicated cases of financial abuse within families. The moment I sat across from her in her office, I felt something shift. She wasn't afraid. She wasn't confused. She knew exactly what kind of people I was dealing with. After I handed her the documents, she studied them carefully, her eyes narrowing with each page. There's clear evidence of forgery here, she said calmly. And misappropriation. They didn't just block your access. They handled this trust like it belonged to them. Hearing someone say it so plainly made my chest tighten, but also gave me a strange sense of validation. I wasn't overreacting. I wasn't imagining things. My parents had broken the law. Carmela wasted no time. She filed for freeze orders to stop any more money from moving. She requested subpoenas for the banks, account histories, and all correspondence tied to the trust. Watching her work felt like watching a storm gather strength. Quiet at first, then powerful, unstoppable. It didn't take long for my parents to realize something was happening. 3 days later, they showed up at my job. I was behind the front desk, helping a customer, when I saw them walk in. Marvette's face was tight with panic, while Reginald looked furious, like I had personally attacked him by defending what was mine. They approached me like they had every right to be there. What are you doing, Nelia? Marvette hissed. Why are there lawyers involved? You're taking things too far. Reginald crossed his arms. We can fix this as a family. You didn't have to bring outsiders into our business. Our business? I snapped, keeping my voice low. You stole from me. You lied for years. I'm done protecting you. You're going to ruin us. Marvette whispered harshly. We raised you. We deserve something. Her words hit me like a cold slap. Even now, they believed they were entitled to my future. I'm not talking about this here, I said firmly. And I'm not stepping back. Not this time. Reginald leaned closer, his voice sharp. You'll regret this. But I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I just walked away from them, leaving them standing there with their anger and fear. When I told Carmela what happened, she wasn't surprised. People like your parents always panic when they lose control, she said. Stay strong. We're just getting started. A few days later, she called me into her office again. Her expression was serious. I found new transfers, she said, sliding a stack of documents toward me. Large ones. They tried to hide them, but they're traceable. And it looks like the trust isn't completely empty. My heart skipped. There's still money left? Not just left, she said. Enough to prove they were still taking pieces long after you became an adult. The legal war had officially begun. And I wasn't backing down. With Carmela's help, I finally gained access to the accounts my parents had hidden from me for years. Logging in felt surreal, like stepping into a world I had been denied my whole life. The numbers on the screen were staggering, far beyond anything I could have imagined. My hands shook as I scrolled through months and years of transactions, each one a painful reminder of what I had lost. There were charges for luxury vacations in places I had only seen in magazines, designer clothes I had never even touched, and lavish home renovations that transformed my parents' house into something I barely recognized. I saw fancy electronics, jewelry, and private school tuition for friends' children, all paid for while I worked 2 jobs just to afford textbooks and rent. My chest tightened, and I felt tears sting my eyes. Every struggle I endured, every sacrifice I made, could have been softened or completely avoided if they had only been honest with me. But as I digested the depth of their betrayal, a new, shocking revelation came from Carmela. My younger brother, Keaton, knew fragments of the truth all along. He had seen the accounts, overheard conversations, and even noticed strange behavior from our parents regarding the trust. But they had threatened him, warning that speaking up would ruin him, and he had stayed silent out of fear. I couldn't believe it. My own brother? I had trusted him, leaned on him during late-night conversations about money, school, and life. The betrayal cut deep. When I confronted him, Keaton's eyes filled with shame. "Nalia," he whispered, voice shaking. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know what else to do. They said if I said anything, I'd be punished. I hated keeping it from you." I felt a mix of anger and compassion. He had been trapped just like I had been, but still, he had been silent. He stepped forward, shaking. "I want to help now," he said. "I'll tell everything I know. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "We'll need you as a witness, Keaton. The truth has to come out, and people need to see everything clearly." He agreed without hesitation, and for the first time, I felt like we were a team. Siblings united against the adults who had tried to rob me of my life. Together with Carmela, we combed through the remaining evidence. Keaton pointed out transactions I might have missed, subtle manipulations, and suspicious transfers that painted a clear picture of how calculated my parents' actions had been. Sitting there, watching him recount every detail, I realized 2 things. First, the betrayal ran deeper than I had imagined. It wasn't just greed, it was manipulation and control. Second, truth had a way of surfacing, no matter how carefully someone tried to bury it. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of power, fragile but real. I wasn't just a victim anymore. With Keaton by my side, I was ready to fight back, to make sure every hidden secret my parents thought would stay buried came into the light. This was no longer just about money. It was about justice, and finally taking control of my life. The day of the court hearing arrived, and I felt a mix of nerves and determination coursing through me. Walking into the courtroom, I saw my parents sitting together, Marvette fidgeting with her rings while Reginald's jaw was tight, eyes darting around as if looking for an escape. I took a deep breath and focused on the goal ahead, reclaiming what was rightfully mine. As the proceedings began, Marvette wasted no time trying to play the victim. She spoke with a soft, trembling voice, claiming she had sacrificed for me, endured hardships, and that the legal action was tearing apart our family. Reginald jumped in, pointing at Eldridge and accusing him of planting ideas in my head, claiming he had manipulated me against them. It was infuriating to hear lies spoken so confidently, knowing how blatantly false they were. Carmela leaned forward, calm and precise, methodically dismantling their stories. She presented the documents, account statements, and transaction records, showing clear patterns of deceit and unauthorized use of the trust. Each paper hit the table with quiet authority, leaving no room for their fabricated claims. When she called Keaton to the stand, I could see the tension in my parents' faces. My brother spoke with honesty, explaining how they had threatened him into silence and outlining the steps they had taken to block my access to the trust. His testimony was careful but firm, and it pierced through their attempts to rewrite the story. Eldridge followed, telling the court about the intentions of my grandmother and the repeated attempts my parents made to hide the trust from me. His voice, steady but tinged with pain, made it impossible for anyone to doubt the truth. I watched as the courtroom absorbed every word, and I felt a sense of strength I hadn't known I possessed. When the judge turned to me, the room fell silent. "Ms. Booker," he said, "can you explain how this has affected you emotionally?" I swallowed hard, feeling every memory rise to the surface. "Your Honor, I grew up thinking my parents were my support, my safety. I worked hard, sacrificed, and trusted them. And they took from me what was meant to help me live a better life. They weren't just dishonest, they made me feel like my struggles were my fault. I felt invisible, like my needs didn't matter. It's terrifying to realize the people who are supposed to love you the most could betray you like this. My voice cracked, and I took a breath. But I'm here now, standing up for myself, and I won't let them take that away again. The courtroom was still for a moment. Reginald's face flushed with anger, and in a sudden, explosive outburst, he shouted about entitlement, sacrifices, and the money being theirs. The judge banged his gavel, calling him to order, but the damage was done. Everyone saw the greed that had been hidden behind their calm facades for so long. The hearing ended with the judge delaying judgment, giving both sides time to review the evidence further. As I left the courtroom, my stomach was a mix of tension and relief. The fight wasn't over, but I had made my voice heard. And for the first time, I truly felt the weight of justice moving closer. The day the verdict was announced felt surreal. I walked into the courtroom, my hands trembling slightly, and took a seat beside Carmela and Keaton. The tension was thick, the air heavy with anticipation. My parents sat a few rows ahead, faces pale, hands gripping the edge of the bench, as though holding on could somehow change what was coming. I took a deep breath and tried to steady my racing heart. When the judge entered, everyone rose, and the courtroom fell silent. He scanned the room, then focused on the papers before him. After careful review of all evidence, witness testimonies, and the documentation presented, he began, "The court finds in favor of Ms. Nalia Booker." My heart nearly stopped. Relief and disbelief washed over me in waves. I could feel my shoulders loosen, my chest finally finding some space to breathe. But even as happiness bubbled up, a heavier, more painful emotion settled beneath it: grief. The grief of realizing how deeply I had been betrayed, how my parents had robbed me of years of security, trust, and innocence. "You are granted full access to the remaining trust funds, as well as restitution payments for the misappropriated amounts," the judge continued. My hands gripped the edge of the bench, unable to stop shaking. I had imagined this moment for years, but nothing could have prepared me for the reality of it. Every struggle I had endured, every sleepless night and long shift, suddenly had context, and I could finally breathe knowing the future I deserved was now within reach. "Reginald and Marvette Booker are hereby found liable for fraud and breach of fiduciary duty," the judge added. "They will face appropriate penalties as determined by the court, including restitution and legal fines." I glanced at my parents. Reginald's face was red, tight with anger, while Marvette's hands trembled as she tried to hide them in her lap. For the first time, I saw the consequences of their actions reflected plainly in their expressions. There was no charm, no excuse, no manipulation left to hide behind. Justice had reached them. Eldridge's hand found mine, squeezing it gently. His eyes were filled with emotion, pride, relief, and a quiet joy that made my own tears spring to life. He pulled me into a tight embrace, his voice low but strong against my ear. "You're free now, Nalia. Free from their lies, free from their control, free to live your life the way it was meant to be." I clung to him for a moment, letting myself feel everything I had held back for so long. Relief, sorrow, anger, and the tiniest spark of hope all collided at once. The weight of years of deceit began to lift, replaced by a cautious optimism I hadn't known I could feel. As I stepped back from Eldridge, I looked at Carmela and Keaton, and then down at the papers confirming everything I had won. This wasn't just about money. It was about reclaiming my life, my dignity, and my voice. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time, it felt like I was walking it on my own terms, unburdened and truly free. After the court's ruling, I finally felt the freedom I had been fighting for, and I knew it was time to start fresh. I moved out of my cramped apartment, packed up my life, and bought a modest house that felt like my own. It wasn't extravagant, but it was mine, and that was more important than anything. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of peace as I unpacked boxes, arranged furniture, and made this new space a home. Everything here was chosen by me for me. The day I settled in, I drafted a letter to my parents. I kept it short, direct, and firm. I told them I would not visit, call, or offer any support while they dealt with the legal and financial consequences of their actions. I didn't write to humiliate them or to gloat. I wrote to set boundaries. This wasn't revenge born of anger. It was the calm, controlled kind that comes from reclaiming your life and refusing to allow someone else to harm you again. I left the letter at their door and walked away, feeling lighter than I had in decades. I soon learned that without my financial assistance, their lives began to unravel. Foreclosures loomed over their home, creditors called daily, and the neighbors who once admired their success now whispered about the court ruling. Word of their misdeeds spread through the community, and the social consequences weighed on them as heavily as the financial ones. I didn't revel in their downfall. I didn't laugh or celebrate. Instead, I felt a quiet sense of closure. The scales had been balanced, not by malice, but by justice. Keaton, who had stood by me during the legal battle, reached out in small ways. At first, I was hesitant. Trust had been broken too many times, but I could see he genuinely wanted to rebuild what had been lost. He visited, helped unpack boxes, and even offered advice on decorating my new home. Slowly, cautiously, I let him back into my life. His efforts were deliberate and sincere, and I could see he wanted to prove he was different from our parents, someone I could rely on. Each day, I let the walls I had built around my heart soften a little, knowing that family could be redefined, rebuilt even after betrayal. As the weeks passed, I focused on building my own life. I enrolled in courses to advance my career, organized my finances carefully, and started planning projects I had once only dreamed of. I felt empowered in a way I never had before, independent and in control of my destiny. The past remained a shadow, but it no longer dictated my every move. I didn't feel joy at their misfortune, but a profound sense of closure washed over me. The years of secrecy, manipulation, and loss no longer held power over me. I was free to live my life on my own terms, surrounded by people who genuinely cared for me, and that was the sweetest revenge of all. With the trust funds finally secure, I began planning my next steps carefully. I decided to use part of the money to go back to school, finishing the degree I had postponed for years while working multiple jobs just to survive. This time, I could focus on learning and growing without the constant stress of financial strain. But I didn't stop there. I also started a small business in my grandmother's honor, a boutique that celebrated her legacy and values. It felt like a way to keep her memory alive while building something tangible for my future. Every detail, from the name to the decor, was a tribute to her love and foresight. Eldridge became an irreplaceable presence in my life. His wisdom, patience, and unwavering support filled the gap my parents had left. He helped me navigate the complexities of running a business, encouraged me to take risks, and reminded me that it was okay to trust again. For the first time in years, I felt like I had a real family, not perfect but genuine. His guidance reminded me that love could exist without betrayal, and that not all relationships were built on manipulation or deceit. As the months went by, I spent time reflecting on everything I had endured. The betrayal had been deep, cutting through years of trust and love I had believed existed. But in confronting the truth and reclaiming my life, I realized I had been rebuilt stronger and wiser. Each legal victory, each hard decision, and each moment of courage had transformed me. The anger and grief remained, but they were tempered by a newfound resilience. I had survived, and that survival had reshaped me into someone who would never again let others control her destiny. I made a vow to myself. My future would belong solely to me. I would protect it fiercely, carefully choosing who to trust and allowing only honesty and respect into my life. Manipulation and deceit would have no place, and I would never let fear or guilt dictate my decisions again. This determination became the foundation for everything I did, from running my business to planning my education and personal goals. Every choice was deliberate, every step intentional, and every moment was mine to shape. One morning, I visited my grandmother's grave, carrying flowers and a heart full of both gratitude and promise. I knelt down, tracing the letters on the headstone, and whispered my vow. "Grandma, I promise I'll live the life you wanted for me. I won't let anyone steal it again. I'll honor you in everything I do, and I'll make sure the love and care you gave me continue to guide me." I stood there for a long time, feeling the weight of the past lift slightly. The grief, betrayal, and hardship had shaped me, but they no longer defined me. I walked away from the cemetery with a sense of peace I had never known before. My life was finally my own, and for the first time, I felt the quiet, steady confidence of someone who had faced darkness and emerged into the light. The future was mine, and I was ready to embrace it fully. Do you think Nelia handled her parents the right way by cutting them out of her life, or should she have given them another chance? Share your thoughts in the comments. I really want to hear what you think. And if you love stories like this, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new one.